Knights, behold the new year of 2026. And I want to start off this year by bringing you all some much deserved content. Many of you are well aware that I've been taking a break from DFO for a few months now, and I will discuss why and much more in a future podcast. But for now, I've come back to make an updated guide video discussing cursed gear and the current best methods to farming them. I have made videos about this subject some 5 years ago. However, since then there has been a litany of changes to the amplification system, such as additional stats, safe amplifications, and new methods in obtaining them. It's worth refreshing the topic for level 115 cap, both for new and returning players alike. So let's start with the basics. What exactly are cursed gears? Cursed gears are considered a variant of gear that all of your standard 12 slots of gear can take. Despite their ominous name, there are no downsides to this gear. In fact, they are considered the best in slot, and that is because they provide this additional pink stat on top of all the normal stats. This pink stat takes the form of one of the 4 base stats: strength, int, vite, or spirit. The game kind of confusingly calls these stats dimensional abilities, but it's not that serious. It's just these pink stats. The amount of pink stats that you gain increases exponentially depending on the gear's amplification level, and something brand new in 115 cap is that you will also gain additional overall damage after certain amplification level thresholds. Adding up these pink stats across all of your gear will clearly give you a substantial damage boost for DPS and stronger buff potencies for buffers. You can perform amplification over here at Kiri once you have a cursed piece of gear. Amplification, for all intents and purposes, functions exactly the same as reinforcement and provides all the same benefits. For instance, a plus 10 reinforced weapon and a plus 10 amplified weapon will all provide the exact same additional physical and magic attack. The only difference between the two gears is again that additional pink stat that amplification provides. You might then wonder, why would anybody bother with reinforcement then? And that has everything to do with the cost. Amplification quickly dwarfs reinforcement by comparison, and that's mainly because of the multitudes more materials and gold it takes to attempt it. This is especially true with your weapon slot for percentage damage characters, who will want to try to get them to plus 12 as a goal due to the increase in physical and magic attack. Comparing the two systems, it's obvious. It's clearly easier and more consistent to get to high levels of reinforcement due to the safety nets and not losing levels on failure. In this case, and this case only, it's not really recommended to attempt to amplify your weapon. Stick with reinforcement. But on that topic, just keep in mind that buffer characters or characters that do fixed damage will absolutely benefit from an amplified weapon. Buffers only care about raw stats to increase their buff potency, and fixed damage characters rely on raw stats and independent attack to increase their damage, so the additional physical and magic attack that you get from weapon reinforcement don't increase their damage at all. In nearly every other scenario in gear slot, you will want to get cursed gear to take advantage of the additional stats and damage boosts. The other benefits that you gain from reinforcing those slots of gear don't really increase your damage or buff potency, and frankly, defensive stats in current day DFO are utterly useless. If you're worried about the massive cost, just keep in mind that even a low amplification level on all of your gear is far more useful than high reinforcement on those same slots. All this probably sounds all well and good, but there's this pivotal detail that I've left out thus far, and that is, you can't simply choose to begin amplifying a piece of gear even if you wanted to. The gear itself needs to be cursed first, and there are currently only a few ways of getting cursed gear. The easiest way to get a piece of cursed gear is to simply apply a curse directly onto a normal piece of gear. This is done with an item called a grimoire. The silver and gold variants of this item are given very commonly from events and sometimes in Sarah packages. They look like this, and when used it will apply the base stat of your choosing and apply a random amount of amplification level dependent on the rarity of the grimoire used. This will overwrite the current level of reinforcement the gear already has, so just be mindful of that. You can technically craft a pure grimoire using a recipe purchased from Clonter here in the affiliate post. However, good luck getting the 25 condensed purities for it. When you're not able to apply a curse using a grimoire, however, the only other way is to get it to drop curse for you outright. You'll know you have one when you see this question mark on the piece of gear with this ominous text in red. The text basically lays out what options that you have before you'll be permitted to equip the gear. You can either use an Otherverse Extinguisher item to remove the curse and make it a normal item fit for reinforcement, or you can use an Otherverse Purification Scroll to apply a random curse stat making it fit for amplification. Extinguishing the curse is almost never recommended. On top of it being a Sarah item, it is kind of wasting a potential curse slot. Instead, whether you want to keep the curse or not, you should purify it and simply use the inheritance system at the Grimoire NPC to move that curse either off or onto the desired gear of your choosing. Just keep in mind that inheritance will also swap over any enchantments between the gears used. So if you want to inherit a curse onto your currently equipped gear, you'll need to re-enchant it all over again with a new card or bead. After purification of a curse gear, it is possible that the randomly applied main stat is not the one you want. In that case, you'll need to use an item called the conversion spell, which will change it to the stat of your choosing. You can find recipes to craft both of these items here at Clonter, or you can buy them directly from the auction hall. However, personally, if you are an enjoyer of the Neo Premium Plus contract, it's recommended that you use your Neo Premium tokens to roll at Canna's shop. All three of these aforementioned items come out of the roulette very commonly. However, all of Canna's items expire at the month's end, so don't go blowing all your coins unless you have curse gear ready to work on. But now that you know how to apply a curse, where exactly do you get these curse gears to drop outright? I am willing to be corrected on this since this comes from experience, but it's my understanding that curse gear only shows up on gear that is of epic grade or higher and is physically dropped from an enemy. That means you will not find any curse gear that is legendary, rarity, or lower, nor will you get a curse gear from something like a pot or dungeon clearance card flip reward. Again, it needs to be at least an epic and something that literally drops on the ground and is looted. This limitation severely limits the potential pool of places that curse gears can drop, especially now in 115 cap, where most of the gear that you get comes from pots and clearance rewards, and they've gone ahead and nerfed or removed a lot of old outdated content for this level cap. But rest assured, there are still some places that you can get them still that don't involve just getting lucky in our current terrible hell mode called Disciple of Doom. But to find them, we're going to have to go back to the previous 110 cap and abuse those old systems. The most consistent and efficient place to farm curse gear, in my opinion, is going to be the Asrahan Archives. This dungeon is potentially 5 rooms large and drops a massive amount of items, including cursed epic gears. What makes this dungeon so potent is that you can leave at any time or choose to risk the items that you've obtained so far to continue going further in the dungeon. However, because you are only looking for cursed pieces of gear, you don't care about getting any of those other items bounced, meaning you simply keep showering in epics until you find the exact piece that you're looking for. Always leave when you find a cursed piece of gear that you don't already own, and you will see how potent this dungeon is at amassing cursed gear sets quickly. You can enter up to 7 times a week per character, but you'll need to have the Archives key entrance item for every run. I have found that the most efficient method in getting them is going to be the raid dungeon called the Asrahan Curtains of Mu, preferably on the hard difficulty. This is a solo dungeon, and with our current level cap, if you're even slightly geared, you should be able to clear this in less than a minute. You'll kill the lock mini boss and then rush to the main boss and boom, insta-give them. You can get a key directly, even in countdown key to give it to an alt, and on top of that you get a lot of 5 element flow materials, 45 of which can be used to purchase yet another key. And you even get a memory shard that you can use to buy up to 4 more tradable keys every week. Basically, just run this dungeon on any character that you want curse gear on and on any alts that can clear it quickly. The next dungeon that I recommend is right next to it in the Asrahan Library. Basically, this was 110 cap's last version of hell mode. Unfortunately, within the drop pool there are epic fusions which can't ever drop curse, so that does muddy up the drop pool a bit. Despite this, however, there is a pity system that guarantees an epic drop after a certain number of runs, which is a great perk. This dungeon requires memory remnants for entry, which are also farmed from the aforementioned solo raid content, but are alternatively available from some other places such as the Forest of Awakening and Dusky Legion dungeons, both of which should be absolutely trivial in this cap. The last dungeon that I suggest is basically my last resort if I'm feeling like grinding endlessly, and that is the Stormwrath's normal dungeon. You access the dungeon by going to the Falacia and entering the L Rocks. This is a very short dungeon that only drops epic gear at a pretty decent rate. I can sometimes get 1 to 2 cursed pieces of gear and a full FP bar of just this dungeon alone. Stormwrath's normal requires gold barrels for entry, which are very cheap and have a lot of potential drop locations. Most notably, I would do the Meister's dungeon on the master difficulty. At one point, I recommended the Stormwrath's weekly dungeon on your top 10 characters that you want cursed gear on, since that dungeon always drops at least a few epics for clearance. However, with some recent testing for the past 3 weeks, I have been unable to even get a single piece of cursed gear. making me believe that this method of getting them was ninja nerfed. I thought I at least should mention it, however, on the off chance that I'm wrong and I'm just unfathomably unlucky. I understand that these are some convoluted and cryptic methods, but trust me, this effort is worth it for cursed gears. Otherwise, you're just waiting for events to give you grimoires or praying to RNGs that you get a cursed epic from your meager Disciple of Doom runs. Because hell modes are so garbage and epics are so rare, it becomes even more important that we capitalize on the few old methods that still remain. It should go without saying, doing any of this old content will cost you a lot of FP, so I'd only suggest doing it if you have nothing else better to do. I want to end this video with a heartfelt message to anyone still listening. DFO wasn't the first game, and it certainly won't be the last. However, it has been an integral part of this channel for a long time. I've on several occasions been spotted on other YouTube channels as the DFO guy, and for that I'm truly grateful. I got into the YouTube game to try and make an appeal towards the games that I have been interested in. Not for the already existing enthusiasts, but for the would-be interested party. So you can understand my utter frustration when Neopol undermines and thwarts my each and every attempt to make DFO appealing and worth a shot. I've had the very sharp impression that as time goes on, DFO has deliberately become less and less inviting for new players, catering only to the old vets and whales. Sure, they buffed up the amplification system, but at the same time made them multitudes harder to obtain for no reason. When you consider what Neopol's intentions were for making such a needless system overhaul, it's enough to make your blood boil. Even after I make this guide telling you how to get cursed gears, I actually don't know how DFO expects you to fund actually amplifying them. How exactly are you farming the 2+ million gold for this singular +10 attempt, let alone all the other attempts on all the other slots of gear? I've not had to make a video like this in the past because of how abundant cursed gears were in the previous caps. Gold was a foregone conclusion, given that you spend FP on level relevant content. You would eventually have all the gold that you need to fund your improvements. Now what does DFO expect out of you? They've gutted gold farming to such a degree that your own repair cost upkeeps are literally a concern you have to worry about now. Every cap they seem to take one more feature or dungeon away while still retaining all the age-old hindrance features like repair costs and clear cube costs. These shouldn't even exist in DFO anymore, especially since most of these systems were intrinsically tied to the blue and white gears that they've conveniently removed. I mean, think about this for a second. The idea with this cap is that they wanted to remove our reliance on gold. That was their justification for removing all of the gold generation methods. However, they did not touch or nerf any of the existing gold sinks. Those are exactly the same as they have always been, and they have never changed. So how could they reduce the reliance on gold by doing that? They've only increased the reliance on gold. It's literally the opposite of what they say. But you know what they're selling to us as a New Year's 2026 special? Well, you can spend Sarah to gamble on cookies, and after you get 1,300 cookies, you can have a sweet +11 amplification ticket. The variance on these Gamba cookies means that you're spending anywhere between $10 minimum or up to 162 real life fucking dollars on a +11 ticket. That is absolutely absurd. If that's the price that Neopol deems acceptable for their whales, just what do you think Neopol's price is expected for anybody who decides to play this game as a free-to-play player? If this is the state of 2026 DFO, then Neopol's mask is completely off at this point. Gone is the pretense that the systems of the game can be overcome with increasing levels of effort. They've deliberately designed the game around cursed gears becoming a pay-to-win system and offer no recourse or alternative while buffing up the potency of them to make them even more alluring to whales. DFO has effectively become a game that is only playable during good events that give handouts like free repairs and amp attempts to offset the otherwise drought of meaningful content. It's with this perspective that my extended leave of absence on YouTube should begin to make more sense. I frankly have found my time better spent honing my skills in Tekken and raiding in Lost Ark. I have always been a veteran player in this game that has always wailed, so none of these complaints really affect me directly. However, as player retention staggers and player interest ever wanes on this game in the West, I can't help but feel hopeless at seeing Neopol's deliberate decisions at milking what little players that we have left. Neopol apparently is long past the point of caring about attracting new players, and when they don't care, how on earth can they expect any player such as myself to care either? It's hard, if not impossible, to make content for a game like this. I can't in good faith try to promote a game where they have gone out of their way to deliberately make the game more insufferable to play specifically for their new players in an attempt to try and milk their whales. I have a lot more to complain about in this cap in general, but we're kind of starting to get off topic. Instead, I hope to cover all of this and much more in an upcoming Arid Airways podcast. Who knows, maybe Female Monk will make all this harbored negativity just disappear. But until then, guys, Knights, begone.